Meetings for 1 hour and 30 minutes, and Brian M will be sharing on steps 6 and 7 for 50 minutes. This is Brian's third time speaking at the Broken Elevator, and we're absolutely delighted to have him back with us at God's meeting. Please help me give a warm welcome to Brian M from Belfast, Ireland. His home group is the Belfast Recover Group. Over to you, Brian.
Thank you, Mel, and thank you everybody else that did service. My name's Brian. I'm an alcoholic. Is this really my third time here? I thought it was the second. They're all very memorable, obviously. I heard one of the talks that I give here on one of those online things. A friend of mine had sent a link through to me, teasing me about being on the internet, and the title was "He did not like working the steps." I don't know who came up with that title, but I must have said that in the middle of the talk. I didn't like working the steps, so I'm not sure if any of you guys did, but I find the steps to be rather painful. Speaking to somebody today, actually, I was on duty today for AA, doing the telephone duty. Here, I tell you what, that's an eye opener. I've never done it before. So my friend Mags in the meeting here strong-armed me into it against my will, and I'm so glad I did, because it was just such a reminder of what it's like before the great gifts that come from Alcoholics Anonymous. I was speaking to this woman at length who was just giving me verbal abuse, and but it's really interesting though, because if anybody else sort of speaks to me that way, I get a wee bit, oh my God, I don't really enjoy being spoken to like that. But with this woman, I just felt love, because I could just feel the pain in her anger. It wasn't like, she doesn't know me, and it turns out she actually recognizes me from one of our meetings. And whenever she realized I was that guy from that meeting where they keep talking about the big book, she got even more abusive. But anyway, I just felt this real compassion for this person who was me and is me. Okay, like I have 12 steps under my belt and some people around me that help to keep me accountable, but like I've got that thing going on. And who the hell else is she going to talk to? Do you know what I mean? Like there's somebody very, very close to me that whenever she got drunk, she would just become abusive to everybody. It's just her thing. And the doctors advised her to get a detox because she was having all sorts of organ failure and whatever whenever she tried to quit alcohol. I'm expressing no opinion on that, let me be clear. That's what the doctors were saying. And but whenever she went to the hospital, she was abusive to their staff, and they quite rightly have this zero tolerance policy to people being abusive to them. But what do you do with a thing like that? How can these marginalized members of society who are acting in ways that are against their will but need to get medical attention, like how can we help people like that? It's something that I often think about, and I was reminded of that talking to that lady today. But anyway, that's where this conversation about working the steps came up, and she said to me, like, yeah, that working the steps looks terribly difficult. I suppose you're going to tell me it's not and it's really easy. And I said, no, I'm not going to say that. I don't think it was easy at all. The only thing more difficult than working the steps was continuing to live how I was living before, which was pretty dark. I'm pretty sure I was as angry as she was today. I'm pretty sure. I can't really remember. If I was, I'd deny it. I don't remember expressing my anger in the same way, but here it's all just fear packaged up, isn't it? I certainly think so. I'm beginning to think so. And I guess experience has taught me that, this spiritual malady from which I suffered and to some degree continue to suffer, for me is just this illusion that I carry at times that I am somehow separate from God. Imagine saying that to a newcomer. The reason why you're drinking so much is because you have an illusion that you're separate from God. Go, what are you talking about? Maybe that's why we don't say stuff like that to newcomers. And I certainly would have run away from that as well. But what can I tell you? It's what it is. It's what it is. And And this anger, which I suppose is the manifestation of fear. And why would I be afraid if I constantly remembered that I am a child of God with the birthright to happiness, peace, and abundance? That I don't have that granted at the mercy of God if I grovel hard enough, that I am actually the child of God. What have I got to fear? My own ego. I've got me to fear, aside from that, God's got that covered. The only person who can screw this up for me is me, with this twisted thinking that kicks in from time to time. Anyway, I was very, very mindful that whenever I was doing that duty today, whenever I was speaking to people, to remember that's all that's happening here. A bunch of children of God just trying to find their way. A bunch of squirrels just trying to get enough nuts to get through the winter. And some handling it in really sophisticated, elegant ways, and other ones yelling at this stranger over the phone. What can I say? I hope she continues on with the conversation tomorrow, because it ended really positively, and maybe she'll go on to tell that story at a meeting like this, and what happened after that, and her reluctance to work the 12 steps changed into a desire to work the 12 steps, and to the benefit from the abundance that comes at the end of that. And I can't really sell it to people. Have you ever tried that? I really can't. I can only tell people that it happened for me. And whenever I tell the truth, I'm finding I'm having to tone the truth down a wee bit, not to tell lies, but to tone the truth down, because my truth is so good that is barely believable. Not interesting. Whenever I talk about the abundance that I experience, that this remarkable life that I have, and how whenever I ask God for 10, for some reason I get 100, and whenever I tell people that, they just look at me as if like, oh God, here we go, and all of one of these woo hippies again. So I find I don't even tell the whole story because it's just too freaking awesome. But it wasn't always like that, of course, and this maybe start with grounding this story in some facts that I think are important. Congratulations, Erica. Hope we get to meet at some point. 18 days. 18 days is a wonderful time. I hope you have your sponsor and you've got your big book and you're actively working through the 12 steps. If not, there's some people on this meeting. Reach out to my friend Tamara there, or any of the other guys who are doing service, who will get you hooked up with a sponsor within 24 hours. If anybody's told you to take your time before getting a sponsor and not to rush into it, those guys are wrong. So this is something that's done with the desperation of a drowning man. I've never seen a man drowning, but I'm pretty sure he's freaking out and trying to get the problem fixed quickly. So go ahead and do that. If you've already got all that sorted, well done. Good on you. And I'm pretty sure we'll continue to be friends for years to come. But I want to draw your attention to the doctor's opinion in the book Alcoholics Anonymous on Roman numerals 28, XXVIII. This is a part of the book I always keep turning to. And whenever I was thinking about what I was going to say tonight, this came into my mind and I thought, oh, no, don't use that one. You always use that one. But the reason why I always use it is because it's just so bloody on point. It really just emphasizes the point that I want to make. Because we're here to talk about step 6 and 7. And steps 6 and 7 to me are a tipping point. So I want to talk about what they are a tipping point from and to. So in order for that to make sense, I need to go back a bit. So it says here at the bottom of that page, men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. I'm presuming all of you people are alcoholics. Otherwise, what the hell are you doing here talking to this weirdo? That being the case, I'm sure I don't need to sell the point that was made in that line. I drank because it felt great. I also, do you hear these people in AA who were like drinking for years and years and said, I never liked the taste of alcohol? I don't know how they did it. I love the taste of alcohol. I love the smell of alcohol. I love the clink of the bottles. I love the whole charade of buying and opening things and the glasses. I loved it all. But mostly what I loved is the effect that it produced. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it injurious, they cannot after a time differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. That's a really interesting line for me, because whenever I was at Erica's stage, please don't be a fool like me, Erica, but whenever I was at that stage, I was thinking, sugar. I nearly swore there, and then Tamara would have kicked me up and down the street afterwards. Schweppes. This means that I can't drink anymore. What am I going to do at weddings? What am I going to do at parties? This weird illusion that, a life without alcohol isn't possible. And if it is possible, it's going to be mundane and rubbish. That was the lie that I was so convinced from. Like, the drinking life was the only normal life, is something that I convinced myself of. Now, of course, that was completely erroneous. But whenever you're in the illusion, whenever you're in the delusion, the main symptom of that is you don't know you have it. So if you are thinking like that, anybody and you're around, don't worry, it's all a load of nonsense. It's not real, but it seems real at the time. And it goes on to say they're restless, irritable, and discontented unless it can again experience the sense of ease and comfort. So like, whenever I get that sense of ease and comfort, which comes at once by taking a few drinks, I don't recall ever saying, so tonight's the night, I'm going to head out and I'm going to get absolutely bladdered, so screwed up, and I might go and get a load of cocaine and wake up beside somebody else's wife instead of my own, and then get into a fight and then ruin my life and destroy my business. Can't wait. I don't remember ever thinking that. What I can remember thinking is not feeling great. I don't feel quite myself. I just need a couple of drinks. Sometimes I set out to get drunk, okay, but often it's just like a couple of drinks. And even the getting drunk that I set out to achieve isn't what ends up happening. It's like, what ends up happening is miles beyond that. But it describes the few drinks as being drinks which they see others taken with impunity. So my brother loves a drink. He would go out and say, I'm going to have 6 pints tonight. And he would have 6 pints. Whenever he feels a wee bit naughty, he might have a wee whiskey on the way out the door, and that's it. Sometimes he'll go out to have 10 pints because he wants to get hammered, and 2 whiskeys. He'll have 10 pints and 2 whiskeys. Like, he likes to drink. But I have no idea what's going to happen. None whatsoever. But my intention is to drink like him, is to have a measured amount, and I will stick to that. That is my intention. And I will pass a lie detector test almost every time that I believe that I could do that. It says, after they have succumbed to the desire again, as so many do, and the phenomena of craving develops. So, Erica, if this hasn't been explained to you yet, the phenomena of craving with alcoholics is what happens after you start to drink. It's not what happens in the absence of the drink. So if I take alcohol into my system in any form, something happens in the bodily, mentally sense that makes it virtually impossible for me to stop. In other words, once it comes in, I just keep going. So I set out to have a couple, or I set out to have a high volume, whatever, but I just need to drink till I pass out. They pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. Remember that the next day with the big sore head and like looking at your text messages from the night before and going, oh my God, checking Facebook and going, oh my God. And then I'm not doing that again. This is crazy. I'm never doing that again. This is repeated over and over. So while you're saying I'm never going to do that again, I then got but of course I'll need a couple today just to take the edge off the hangover. So this is repeated over and over, and unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope of his recovery. This chapter also describes that person, a person like me, before finding the gifts that you guys give me, as doomed. Doomed. Like, I'm from a lineage of sponsors who like to get dictionaries from 1939 and look at what things meant in those days, whatever. I'm pretty sure doom just meant doomed. It's not good. We have another word in Belfast for describing doomed, begins with an F and ends with ED. So I didn't say it, Mel. It's not good. So that's what's on the cards here. Like, if this book ended there, like, I'd be dead by now. But it talks about this weird psychic change thing. What does that mean, psychic change? Like, what's all this? But it says, on the other hand, and strange as this may seem to those who do not understand me at the time, once a psychic change, there it is again, has occurred, the very same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, that was definitely me, suddenly finds himself easily to control his desire for alcohol. Wow, I don't know why you guys are here, but I'm here because I couldn't stop pouring drink down my neck. Couldn't stop pouring booze down my neck. You know, I hear people saying I come in for my drinking and I stayed from thinking all this stuff. I don't know what all that is. I just come in here because I couldn't stop drinking. And now I find it ludicrously easy to not drink alcohol. In fact, that statement is inaccurate because that implies that the not drinking is an obstacle that I find it easy to get over. It's not even an obstacle. I haven't had a conscious thought of taking a drink in years. And I don't try to not drink. It goes on to say, however, the only effort necessary being not required to follow a few simple rules. So that's the guidance within the 12 steps and the 3 legacies of AA, all of which I do and haven't not done since I got sober. So I don't really know what happens whenever you don't do AA after you got sober, other than I've seen what happens whenever other people don't do it. They drink. That's the lucky ones. The ones that don't drink just seem to go absolutely bonkers. So I don't really fancy doing either of those, but it talks about this person who's in the before stage, you know, on this merry-go-round. If I'm never going to drink again, I might have a couple now, drink till I see others taken with impunity, phenomena, craving develops, get hammered, wake up the next day, I'm never doing that again, but I might have a couple, and over and over and over and over. How do you go from that to you're skipping through the daisies whistling, not thinking about alcohol, and for that not being a thing? Well, it says a psychic change. So whenever I'm looking at the before and after, I find those 2 paragraphs really powerful because they're short, they're right beside each other, and it's boom into this is how bad it is and this is how good it gets. Erica, how do you fancy that? How do you fancy just going through life where you never have to fight alcohol again? You might have heard in some places that the AA program would have you fight alcohol 1 day at a time for the rest of your life. That is erroneous. That is a nonsense. That is not the AA program. And I'll explain how the AA program works at the end. Once we get to the end, I want to save that wee bit. I'll give you a bit of a sneak preview. So another way of looking at this, psychic change and sort of more secular language, which I think sometimes is useful, not to detract away from the spirituality of the program, but on page 567 there's an appendix number 2, which talks about this whole spiritual experience thing, you know, or psychic change, you know, this thing that happens as a result of the 12 steps. And it says the terms spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book, which upon careful reading shows that the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifest, itself among us in many different forms. So what this is a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism. So I'm the guy who's doing that same thing over and over and over again. And now I'm not. What happened in between? My personality changed. I have had a personality change as a result of the 12 steps. Now, what does that mean? Well, we can just go over this a million different times, and I could probably give you a million different answers based on different things I've read and, you know, and different speakers who I listen to, but I can tell you what it means to me. So if you ask me to behave in a particular way, Mel, no matter what it is, I'm pretty sure I could do it. I could probably even do it for 2 weeks. And then eventually I'm going to go back to form. I'm going to go back to who I am within my default. And water's going to start running downhill again, and I'm just going to be whatever my default settings would have me be, or my aggregate thinking. And some would say whatever my heart would have me do. You know, there's all sorts of different language around what that means, but I like the term aggregate thinking. I can manually override that default for a while, and then I can't. If you'd have said to me in my full flight, don't drink for 2 weeks, I'm pretty sure I could have done it. In fact, I have done it. And then eventually water starts running downhill. If you say to me things like, just do the next right thing, I hear that said quite a lot to new people in AA. If I could do the next right thing, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you jackasses. I'd be away, I'd fly my kite somewhere else. But this whole idea of just doing the next right thing, right? That doesn't seem to work for me. So is that what needed to change? Or it certainly didn't work for me at the time. Does that mean that there's something wrong with me morally? Well, I like what it says here on page 44 of the big book, at the bottom of that page, where it said, if a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, so that's what we're looking for, the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism. So if a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to do that, many of us would have recovered long ago. So don't be telling me to do the next right thing whenever I've come in here sweating and stinking of alcohol. I don't know how to do it. I want to do it. Like I didn't come in here to be given a code of morals or a life philosophy. I have good morals. I always did. And by good, I mean the ones that I'm comfortable with. I haven't changed them. Haven't changed them at all. So it's not about gaining a moral code or a moral compass. It says, but we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us, no matter how much we tried. We already had them. I already had them. I was already trying to live up to the life that I wanted to live. I was already trying to be the me that I wanted to be. I wasn't trying to be the me that you wanted me to be. I was trying to be the guy that was within me, trying to be the good fella all along. But for some reason, I couldn't do it. Could for 2 weeks. Sometimes it wasn't 2 weeks. I don't know where I got that number from, but I remember being in around that. But ultimately, water will start running downhill again, and then I will start behaving outside of who I am. This isn't the case that I was the guy who did all the things that I don't want to do anymore. Behaving in the kind of activities that I don't want to do anymore, I never wanted to do. I never felt that they would reflect who I was. So I didn't need a new code. I already had a good one. I just couldn't live up to it. I couldn't do the next right thing. We could wish to be moral. We could wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could will these things with all our might, as I did, but the needed power was not there. So the diagnosis of the condition before I had this personality change or spiritual awakening or whatever you want to call it was that I was powerless. Yes, I was powerless over alcohol, but it was powerless in terms of living up to what I wanted to be as a man, as a human being, as somebody interacting with their fellows on this planet. Totally cool with the moral compass that I had before because it hasn't changed. What's changed, though, is I have the ability to live up to that most of the time. And whenever I say I have the ability, it's not that I gained anything other than the awareness of a power within me that was able to grant that ability on a sustained basis. Lack of power, that was our dilemma, but we had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. But where and how will we define this power? That's exactly what this book is about. So this is all starting to make sense in this piece by piece sense. Completely doomed, but I need to have one of these personality change things. How am I going to have one of those? God. Okay, well, for a guy like me, that's not what I wanted to hear. The good news is in AA, we don't tell you what God means. It can be whatever it needs to mean to you. I don't accept that it's a door handle or a lamppost or all that weird stuff, But it says that the purpose of the book is to reveal to me what that is to me. I thought, in fact, I was told in rooms that call themselves Alcoholics Anonymous, that what you actually do is you dream up your own God thing, and it can be your local football team or whatever, and then you wrap the 12 steps around it, where what this is saying is the opposite is the case. See, the moral compass you have is probably fine. I don't know. We're not even going there. But if you want to find the power that helps you to live up to that, it's a power that exists deep down within. And the 12 steps will help you to understand and to realize who you actually truly are and to sustain that. It's a pretty good deal whenever you look at it that way. The manifestations of this powerless, confused, frightened person, for me, well, I don't play golf, Tamara, right? And if you ever play golf, anybody here play golf? It just looks really difficult. You know the big long golf bat things that they use with the wee heavy end? You're not meant to grip them very tight, apparently. And maybe that's where I was going wrong. My brother's a great golfer, and he just gently grips the handle where he's barely holding it, and then he swishes it back, and you get the wee ding of the ball, and away it goes. It's all very elegant. I just want to hold on so bloody tight and then wallop the damn thing, and that doesn't work with golf. So that's kind of like what I was, the way I was with life. I wanted to hold on to everything so tight because I was afraid. What if you took away from me that thing that I need? And if I could just get the money, or if I could just get the girl, or in my case, as it was at the time, if the girl would just leave, if I get the kids through college, and if only people could see how good it, and just holding on so tight to everything. The page 60 and 61 gives this great analogy of this actor who's trying to run the whole show. Sometimes he's being a bit of a diva by demanding, no, put the lights on me and make sure I get the kiss of leading lady and get me on my good side. And, or sometimes he's just being one of these guys that's ever so nice in order to manipulate an outcome favorable to him. That was the way I lived my life. But why? Why? Because I couldn't let that go because I was so invested in a specific outcome going my way. And then there's this killer line, is he not really a self-seeker even when trying to be kind? Is he not a victim of the delusion he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only manages well? If I only manage well, I will be happy. If this goes the way I want it to go, then I will be happy. So that's how I've seen the problem, or that's how I can now see the problem in hindsight at the far side of these steps. And again, looking at what the answer is to that and how to get past this onto the next stage, which is the walking through the daisies whistling, not thinking about alcohol. You don't have to walk through daisies, by the way. That's just a picture I like to paint. But the method to that is the same as one we spoke about before. At the bottom of page 62, here's the how and why of it. Quit playing God. Why? Because you're crap at it. There you go. So how's that going running your own life? Terrible. Okay, then maybe don't do that. The only thing I had evidence to support was the fact that what I was doing was a terrible idea. Yet it's the only thing that I could argue was the right thing to do. How insane is that? How insane is that? So don't do that. Quit playing God. Knock it off because you're crap at it. Okay? Move on. And instead adopt these new roles. No longer the director, be the actor. Don't be the principal, be the agent. Don't be the father, be the child. Imagine being the child of God where, like my kids never say to me like, oh my God, is there enough money to buy food this month? They just let me worry about crap like that. They don't get involved in it. Imagine going through life like that where you don't have to hold on so tight. And to become trusting and reliant on an energy that passes through every single human being. To bring the outcomes in terms of what's needed. The top of page 63, when we sincerely took such a position, all sorts of remarkable things followed. I'm not going to bang out about the word remarkable. I did a talk here. That was the second talk, actually, the remarkable one, where I just talked about the times whenever the book, in this book, it talks about remarkable. There's quite a lot. Remarkable things followed. Not like, oh my God, I woke up this morning and I didn't wet the bed and I didn't take a drink today. That's not remarkable. That's a crap way to live. What we're talking about here is remarkable. So whenever I took that position, remarkable things happened. We had a new employer. Please hold on to that line. I'm going to come back to it. We had a new employer. Being all powerful, he provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. What a deal. Stay close to God, performers work well. How to stay close. Steps 10, 11. We'll talk about that in a while. Performers work well. Step 12, being of service. We'll come back to all that in a minute. But do this deal. Do this deal, and I get whatever I need. And whatever I need is going to be remarkable. Not just all right, remarkable. Very good deal. Bear in mind, I'm the doomed guy reading this. Doom's not a good thing. I know some of you guys are from the United States, but I'm pretty sure doom means the same thing there. You guys have a different meaning for the word football. It's not even close to ours. But with doomed, it just means you're screwed, no matter where you're from or what way you look at it. So to be that guy and to be told that if I could just give myself up to a simple program, simple but not easy, but nonetheless simple, and trust and rely on that process, that I'll get remarkable stuff. Well, I wish I could say I wanted to believe it. It just seemed a little bit beyond reach. Like, what do you mean I can't hold on really tight? Page 68, perhaps there's a better way. We think so. For now, on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying on God. I could trust okay, but I couldn't rely on. I don't even know this guy. Don't even know this God guy. How am I going to risk everything? I would have been fine doing the whole relying on God thing if he sent me the blueprints in advance for me to sign off. But this whole, well, you don't know how it's going to turn out, but trust that God's going to have your back. It's like, screw that. But nonetheless, this is what is suggesting might be a better idea for a guy who can prove that the way that he was living was not the right way to live. So, getting back to the discomfort of the program, Erica, please don't be put off. It's worth it. Working through steps 4 and step 5 and the inward facing nature of step 4. I thought it was about finding stuff that you guys did to me and write it all down, because that's really easy. Like, blaming other people for my stuff's dead easy. But there's a point at which a mirror is placed on me and I realize that, oh my God, I'm talking about me the whole time. How does this affect me? And then I'm looking at, but where am I wrong? And this whole difficult process, and then talking about that with someone else and allowing God to come into that room. And at this stage, I'm not really getting bogged down with what God means. I'm just looking at what this experience is doing for me. So we're going to talk about steps 6 and 7 now. At last, I hear Mel saying. But I felt I needed to give a bit of background to what I'm about to say, because what I'm about to say, the way that I look at this and the way that my contemporaries look at this isn't necessarily the way that I've heard a lot of people say it. And before we get into the whole which way is right and which way is wrong, I don't know what to tell you. If other people see it differently, I think that's awesome, but this is how I see it. So on page 76, the paragraph about step 6, and let me just talk about this a second. There's 2 paragraphs. One for step 6 and one for step 7. Step 1 has got millions of paragraphs, not millions, but it's got, dozens of pages. And I hear people saying that because step 6 and 7 is so short, we need to rely on supplementary information, other books and all the rest. I dispute that entirely. These are the size that they are because of the size that they are. Now, step 6 is enormous. The paragraph might be small, but don't be fooled. It is enormous, because it says, if we can answer to our satisfaction, then we look at step 6. So there's a precursor here. There's a requirement in advance. If we can answer what's our satisfaction? Well, it refers to the previous paragraph, which says, returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour. So this is post step 5. Carefully reviewing what we have done. We thank God from the bottom of our hearts that we know him better. So how could you know God better as a result of talking to somebody you barely know about some stuff on a page? Well, it's like, getting to know God is about removing blocks to God. So the more blocks that are removed, the closer I become to God, and then the more I know God. So taking this book down from our shelf, we turn the pages which contain the 12 steps. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we ask if we have admitted anything. So that's the first question. So if we can answer our satisfaction, firstly, that if we have omitted anything, left anything out, failed to include, gee, it's tempting, isn't it? It's tempting not to write down that thing that I don't want people to know about. Well, this is the time to review that. It's okay. Not the end of the world. Shouldn't have done it. Just get it done now. But that needs to be looked at before we go on to step 6. For we are building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. The next question, is our work solid so far? Like, am I just dancing around with this? Am I just doing it? Am I treating this with anything other than the absolute thoroughness that it deserves? But then it says, are the stones properly in place? So these masonry terms are used throughout the book, aren't they? The first stone that we were introduced to was on page 47. So again, before I do step 6, in terms of the answering to my satisfaction, I need to see, have I put the stones in place? On page 47, the second paragraph, it says, we needed to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe that there is a power greater than myself? As soon as a man can say that he does believe or is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him that he is on his way. It has been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. So there's the first one of these stones that needs to be put in place. Am I okay with the God thing? Well, I don't even have to be, but I need to be willing to be okay with the God thing. I need to be willing to believe. And then this cornerstone's put in place. I didn't know what a cornerstone was before I started working through the 12 steps, but the cornerstone, certainly in the 1930s anyway, before the use of technology, was a big old stone that was laid with an incredible amount of precision. They used whatever kind of leveling, devices they had to make sure that that was perfectly level. And then all the walls took their level from that stone. If the cornerstone's wonky, everything's wonky. So the importance of being willing to believe is huge. So I can't go on to step 6 until I've reviewed that, until I can say that that stone is properly put in place. The other stone we touched on a second ago on page 62, that's with the whole, we had to quit playing God, it didn't work. Next, we decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be our director. He is the principal, we are his agents. He is the father, we are his children. Most good ideas are simple, and this concept was the keystone of the new and triumphant arch through which we pass to freedom. So a keystone in an arch is the one at the top that pushes down, and then it puts pressure on the load-bearing walls at the side, so it's safe to walk under. If I'm walking under that damn thing and the keystone isn't properly in place, that's going to crush me. So the importance of understanding, first of all, the willingness to believe, and then what that means is described in the keystone of back the hell off. Stop trying to run this whole thing. Don't grip the damn club so tight. Allow yourself to adopt this new role, or 3 new roles, depending on what way you want to look at that. But each of them speak to a submissive role. Certainly not a passive role. You hear people saying this whole, I just hand it over to God and everything just works out fine. That's how I live my life. See, if any of you guys do that, phone me up afterwards and tell me how the hell that works, because I need to work my ass off for this to work. This isn't like a passive sitting on the couch eating KFC, watching Netflix, praying and stuff. This is a proper hand it over to God, and to actively be involved in that, to be involved in being, the agent of God. The spearhead of God's ever-advancing creation is described at one point. Imagine getting that role. What's your job? I'm the spearhead of God's ever-advancing creation. What's yours? Am I actively involved in that is the question here. Am I adopting these roles? Or am I just dancing around with the importance of that? Because unless I can answer that to my satisfaction, I don't get to move on. Go back to page 75. It then says, have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? Some people think that the foundation is step 1. I can't see anywhere in the book where it says that, but cool, whatever. I can see, however, where this cement analogy is used, and on page 17 is talking about the fellowship. Am I embracing the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous? and it looks at these two components to this mortar. It talks about the feeling of having shared in a common peril is one element of the powerful cement that binds us. My friend Mel, if she takes alcohol into her system in any form whatsoever, something happens in the bodily mental sense that makes it virtually impossible for her to stop. My friend John B, same story. There you go. There's a commonality to our peril. But it goes on to say, but that in itself would never have joined us together, or held us together as we are now joined. The tremendous fact for every one of us is that we have discovered a common solution. So those two people that I just described, I have the same peril as them. And guess what? I have the same solution as them as well. Alcoholics Anonymous has become this kind of a weird thing where there's a lot of weird in-between stuff where you just lots of people sitting around going to meetings one day at a time, waking up in the morning, crapping themselves and going to bed at night, thanking God they survived another day, whatever. I have the same peril as them, but I don't have the same solution. I don't. I stand shoulder to shoulder with the people who have this solution, where it's described as we have a way out on which we can absolutely agree. Now, they did agree at the time, unfortunately not so much anymore, upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is the great news this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism. It's about the book. It's about the 12 steps. Am I standing shoulder to shoulder with my fellows who are going to the fellowship, not to talk about my broken fridge and how my wife doesn't love me anymore, but I'm there to share the solution of Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't get to go on to step 6 until I ensure that's put in place. Am I using the meetings and the fellowship of AA for the purpose for which they were designed, which is the teaching and practicing of the 12 steps? Do you have the willingness to believe? And am I adopting the rules that are put in place in the Keystone? If I can answer that to my satisfaction, I then get to look at step 6, where it says we've emphasized willingness. So step 6 isn't about willingness, it's talking about past tense. This is how I see it anyway. We've emphasized willingness as being indispensable. And this is the point. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all things which we have admitted objectionable? Difference between willingness and ready. Mel, I'm willing to retire from gainful employment tomorrow. In fact, I would love it. I wouldn't need to train for it or anything. I'd slot into that role brilliantly. But am I ready? Well, I don't have enough money for a start. So I can be as willing as I want. I'm not ready to do it. So for step 6 to be about willingness, to me it seems like it's important, but it's a small part of the story. Am I ready? Am I ready to give up all these things? Am I ready to give up the way that I used to view members of the opposite sex as is my preference, for example? Am I willing to give up the sort of business deals that I enjoyed doing because they were profitable, but not necessarily in keeping with the principles I'm wanting to adopt? Am I ready to give all that up? I'm certainly willing to give it all up, but am I ready to? Because then I'm going, oh my God, this is actually sacrifice. Now, I had to spend some time in this because it says if we still cling on to something we'll not let go, we ask God to help us to be willing. And I needed to work on that before I can move on to step 7, such as the size of that so-called small paragraph. And step 7 says, so once you get to that stage, when ready, so if not ready, forget about it, don't go any further. When ready, we say something like this. And then we have this glorious prayer. And this is where I get into sort of hot water sometimes. And if I'm going to say something you disagree with, it's cool. I love that you have your way of looking at this. This is mine. My Creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I thought this is where I give up my defects. Well, sure. But I also give over the characteristics that are admirable. Whenever I go back to the part I said I was going to reference again, page 63, we had a new employer. This idea that I can decide what's a character defect just baffles me. I can't decide what socks to put on most days. The idea that I would be trusted with the job of putting together a list of what is good about me and what is bad about me just it doesn't make sense to me. But it's not what it says here either. It asked me to give God everything. So I used to do this thing with people who are sponsored where we'd have like five little balls, and they were blue, and then 5 balls that were red, and say, right, the red ones are defects, and the blue ones are positive characteristics. Which am I giving to God here? And the answer was always, well, it's the defects. No, it's all of it. Because they're only those colors because I've decided they're those colors. They're only good or bad because I've decided they're good or bad. And I've given up that game. I'm not running this show anymore. I don't get to decide anything. I get to respond to the guidance. That's my role here. I'm the puppet to the puppet master that's, capable of all things and everything. So if I'm giving that all up, say, for example, I had to give up anger. Let's say I had to give up anger. I used anger yesterday with one of my children, and it was the perfectly appropriate use. It was the right thing to use. Now, I didn't lose my mind and start beating him around the head with a bat. Of course, that's a different story. But anger was the right thing to use. Now, that would have been one of the things I would have given up if I was in charge of deciding that. What about love and kindness and, being gracious, whatever? I've used that for self-seeking many, many, many times. I've used those in so-called evil ways. It's not a word I'm comfortable with, but, do you know what I mean? This set of characteristics and deciding which ones are good and which ones are bad, I believe laughs in the face of what we learn on page 62 and 63. This is about giving it all to God to decide what I'm going to need in the moment, which is the only place where the only place where God lives. So if I give all that up, how does the next part make sense? I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. So I've given God everything, the good and the bad. And as I go about my day and engage in whatever activities, I'm given what I need. I'm not given what would be a defect to the outcome that's in line with the spiritual guidance that I've been given. So I do my usual prayer before I do anything. I did one before I come on here. Maybe some of what I would have called defects are glaringly obvious to some people. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I don't get to decide. I just turn up and do the role that I'm here to do. If I was to say, I better not behave like this or I better not behave like that, I'm adopting this stage character way of living. I'm doing something other than what the spiritual principles have taught me up to that point. This isn't about, I believe, putting together a list of things that I chip away at for the rest of my life. This is at this point, the character defects are removed in their entirety. The catch being that is achieved by realizing that I never actually had any. I am a perfect child of God, given everything that I need. And because of the intervention of my ego, I've been using some of those characteristics in ways that were not favorable to a positive outcome for me or the people around me. There's nothing wrong with the characteristics. It was the deployment of those characteristics that was the problem. The removal of the defects is the realizing that all I have is a bunch of characteristics that are badly managed. And if I give that all to the new employer that I'm told that I have on page 63, and the details of which are described in the bottom of the following page or the previous page, then I'm given what I need in order to do his work well. I'm given what I need in order to be useful to God and my fellows. It goes on to say, grant me strength as I go out here to do your bidding, because I'd love to say that I find that part easy, because I want to control all that. I want to control my behavior. I want you to like me. I want you to dislike me whenever I find it amusing. I want to do all. I want to be actively involved in the business of running me whenever I know that the evidence of the years has taught me that I'm not particularly good at that. But this is what steps 6 and 7 mean to me. There is no rock to drop. It's the realization that I am a child of God. And what does that mean? It's twofold. Child of God means that I already have everything that I need from my birthright. But also I can rely upon God in the same way that my children rely upon me for to be given whatever they need. Isn't that a wonderful thing? Like whenever I read on to the post-recovery situation, which which I think is most beautifully explained in the bottom of page 84. Erica, if you're still around, this is the prize. Bottom of page 84, we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. Just don't fight alcohol. I don't know what it is to fight alcohol. I haven't done it in years. For this time, sanity will have returned. We will seldom be interested in liquor, and if tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally, and we find that this has happened automatically. We will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. Remember, the doctor's opinion said easily. That's describing easily. It just comes. That's the miracle of it. We're not fighting it. Neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. Erica, that's what's on offer here. Not by getting to meetings one day at a time, but by working the program and really adopting these spiritual principles. What's on offer here is that drink thing goes away. It just goes. And you know what? If my sponsor said to me that's the only thing that was on offer, I would say, where'd I sign? But there's more. And there's a lot more. And there's a hell of a lot more. You know, by living my life within steps 10 and 11, I'm holding my ego accountable. I'm looking for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. Whenever they crop up, I'm dealing with that swiftly. I'm not living my life, in the past or looking into the future. I see these things and deal with them straight back into the present, aligned with the will of God. Feeling the power flow through. Start feeling uneasy. What is it? Is it selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear? Brilliant. To figure that out, deal with it, move on, back in line with the will of God again. I have that tool to deal with that all the time. So abundance is flowing through me all the time. Some of the crumbs are falling off, and the crumbs are so amazing that they're enough for to build a full life, but the majority is going to the benefit of other people. Guess what happens whenever that happens? That bounces back onto me as well in the most abundant ways. I don't know why. It's not because I'm a particularly good guy. It's certainly not because I'm lucky. But whenever I'm doing this work, whenever I'm committed to this work, that's how it happens and that's how it works. But I must remember that I'm not running this show. I don't put a list of defects together that I work away on. I stay in the present. Page 86, after it looks at the meditations that are, the meditations in step 11 are not Eastern meditations as such, which is obviously fine if that's what you're into. But the meditations are, we conclude the period of meditation with a prayer that we be shown all through the day what our next step is to be. Even whenever I'm all better and everything, I'm asking to be shown what my next step is to be. I'm still not controlling it. Even from a place of health, I'm not controlling it because that would take away my health. I'm asked to be shown that we be given whatever we need to take care of such problems. We especially ask for freedom from self-will. So for me, I know I talked about more than step 6 and 7, but I don't really know how to talk about them in isolation because there's a before and there's an after. And step 6 and 7 to me are the bridge that sits right on that because that's the point where it all changes. That's the point where I not only realize that I can't run this show anymore, that's the point whenever I give this over to God or the divine or the spirit of the universe or whatever terminology that you're using, whatever. I have no opinion on whatever works for other people, but I know what works for me. And I've been doing this for years now. And whenever I look back on the things that I put on God's hands, compared to the things that I held on to by myself, the things that I placed in God's hands, the outcomes were remarkable. And whenever I say remarkable, I mean gasp at the outcome. The things that I continue to hold on really tight to, because there were quite a few of them, all turned to you know what. And I can see it so clearly now. That's the only benefit of time in AA. I don't really get this whole, if you've been around longer, you're more spiritually awake. The newer ones who've just had the experience seem to be more spiritually awake. But hindsight has taught me what happens when I don't apply this process. Anyway, Erica, hopefully that's been helpful to you in particular. And if anybody else has found it useful, congratulations to my friend Nicole, 17 years. She's a great asset to me and a great friend as well. And it's good to see you guys. Thank you all for listening.